You want to know the exact moment I realized my life had become a suburban noir thriller? It wasn't when the HOA sent me a nasty gram about my mailbox being the wrong shade of eggshell. No, it was the moment I realized my neighbor was literally sucking the life out of my house like some kind of high-tech electrical vampire. Honestly, I should have seen it coming. My name is Daniel, and I'm an electrical engineer, which is just a fancy way of saying I'm the guy people call when they can't figure out why their toaster is screaming at them. I live for logic, circuits, and efficiency. My house. It's my masterpiece. I've got solar panels that soak up the sun like a lizard on a rock, feeding these massive batteries in my garage. On a normal day, I'm practically off the grid. The sun does the heavy lifting, the batteries store the leftovers, and by the time the moon hits the sky, my whole world runs on pure, silent, golden storage. It's beautiful. It's poetic. Until that one Thursday evening, I walked into the garage, expecting that familiar, soft green glow from the monitor. Instead, it was blinking red. 5%. I actually stopped and rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I'd developed a sudden case of colorblindness. It made 0 sense. The sky had been a perfect, cloudless blue all day, the kind of day my panels live for. My batteries should have been bursting at the seams. But here I was, watching my house go into cardiac arrest. Inside, the fridge started that high-pitched, I'm dying beep as it hit low power mode. Then the AC just gave up. Click. Silence. In the middle of a humid week, that silence is a threat. I pulled out my phone, fingers flying over the monitoring app, looking for a blown fuse, anything. The data was a slap in the face. Solar production? Perfect. Battery storage? Drained. Grille d'usage? Sky high. But here's the kicker. The power wasn't flowing into my house to run the microwave or the lights. It was flowing out. Somewhere else. Someone was bleeding me dry, and they weren't even being subtle about it. I stood there in the dark, sweating, and only one name popped into my head. Karen Whitmore. Now, if you've ever lived in a neighborhood with a homeowners association, you know a Karen. But my Karen? She was the final boss of Karens. She was the HOA president, a woman who treated the neighborhood bylaws like they were handed down on stone tablets. She'd cite you for your grass being a quarter-inch too long or for leaving a garden hose visible from the street like it was a federal crime. She spent her days patrolling the sidewalks with a clipboard and a look of permanent smelling salts disgust. But 2 weeks ago, Karen had leveled up. She bought a Tesla, a bright, screaming red Model S. And man, did she want everyone to know how green she was. At the last meeting, she spent 20 minutes lecturing us on our carbon footprints while waving her latte around. When someone asked how she was going to charge it, since her house didn't have solar and our local rates are highway robbery, she just gave this breezy, dismissive wave. "Oh, I'll figure something out," she'd said, with this smirk that I now realized was the literal definition of foreshadowing. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I went hunting. I started at the back fence, where the utility lane runs. It's a mess of mulch, bushes, and hidden conduits. Most people wouldn't see anything but dirt. But I'm an engineer. I see patterns. And there, tucked under a layer of fresh mulch and landscaping fabric, was a thick, black, industrial-grade extension cable. It was snaked along my fence line like a greasy copper cobra. I followed it, heart pounding, and sure enough, it slipped right through a gap in the boards and disappeared straight into Karen's backyard. I didn't even think. I marched across the street and pounded on her door. She opened it wearing these massive, bug-eye sunglasses, holding a mug that probably said "World's Best Boss" or something equally delusional. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with boredom. "It's you." "Morning, Daniel." "Morning, Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Quick question. Why is there a high-voltage power cable running from my solar inverter under the mulch and into your yard?" She didn't even blink. She just took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Well, I figured you wouldn't mind." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "You figured I wouldn't mind? You're stealing my electricity, Karen. That's not a cup of sugar. That's my utility bill." She leaned against the doorframe, totally unfazed. "Look, Daniel, you have solar panels. That energy is basically free, right? You aren't even using all of it during the day. And charging a Tesla from the grid is it's so expensive. Solar is cleaner anyway. Think of it as a neighborhood contribution. A contribution? You tapped into my system without asking. She rolled her eyes, actually rolled them at me. As HOA president, I have the authority to make reasonable decisions for the betterment of the community. Don't be dramatic. If you have a problem, feel free to file a formal complaint with the board, which, as you know, I lead. Then she shut the door. Just thud, right in my face. I stood on her porch for a long minute, staring at the wood grain. Part of me wanted to go back there with a pair of wire cutters and just snip that cable into confetti. But that's what a normal person does. I'm an engineer. And engineers, we don't just fix problems. We optimize the consequences. I went home and got to work. Step 1, surveillance. I installed 2 4K motion-activated cameras along my back fence, hidden in the foliage. Step 2, the test. See, my solar inverter has a few hidden settings. Most of the time, it runs in efficiency mode, nice, steady, boring. But there's a maximum output testing mode. It's designed for stress testing the equipment. It pushes the voltage to the absolute limit of the safety specs. It's perfectly fine for my heavy-duty industrial wiring, but for a cheap-ass extension cable and a sensitive EV charger, it's like trying to sip water from a fire hose. The next day was a scorcher. Perfect. Around 11:20 a.m., my phone buzzed. Power draw detected. I pulled up the camera feed. There was the red Tesla, plugged in and humming away on my dime. Karen was probably inside, enjoying her AC and feeling like a genius. I sat in my garage, laptop open, feeling like a Bond villain. All right, Karen, I whispered. Let's see how clean this energy really is. I clicked the mouse. System override, max output mode. The inverter in front of me let out a low, ominous hum, like a hornet waking up. The voltage climbed. Higher, higher. I watched the live feed of her driveway. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then pop. Even through the camera, I heard it. A sharp, electrical crack that sounded like a gunshot. A tiny puff of blue smoke drifted up from the base of her charger. The lights on her Tesla went dark. A second later, the car started beeping. Not the "I'm happy" beep, but the "I've just had a stroke" alarm. Karen came sprinting out of her house like her hair was on fire. She was frantic, tapping the screen on her charger, unplugging and replugging the cable. Nothing. She looked like she was about to cry over her precious red toy. Then, she did exactly what I hoped she'd do. She walked around the side of her house to check the secret cable. She walked right in the frame of my 4K camera. I watched her yank the cable out of the bushes, her face twisted in this ugly, panicked snarl. She looked around nervously, then tried to shove the connector back together. Every movement, every desperate, guilty look captured in crystal clear high definition. I had her, but I didn't call the cops. Not yet. I want a live audience. The Saturday night HOA meeting at the community clubhouse was packed. Everyone was there because Karen had put lawn maintenance fine increases on the agenda. She stood at the front with her clipboard, looking smug as ever, despite her car being currently bricked in her driveway. Before we begin, she announced, I'd like to remind everyone that any grass over 3 inches will now result in an immediate $50 fine. We have standards to uphold. The room groaned. People were pissed, but they were used to being bullied by her. I stood up. Actually, Karen, before we get to the grass, I have a little presentation about neighborhood contributions. Karen's face went from smug to suspicious in about 3 seconds. Daniel, this isn't the time for personal grievances. Sit down. Oh, it's not a grievance, I said, walking up to the front and plugging my laptop into the big screen TV used for slideshows. It's a masterclass in electrical engineering. I hit play. The room went dead silent. There was the cable snaking through the dirt. There was the close-up of the connection to my house. And then, the star of the show, Karen Whitmore, in her bug-eye sunglasses, dragging the cable through the mud and plugging it into her car. Wait, someone yelled from the back. Is that the president stealing power? She's siphoning his solar, another guy shouted. The video jumped to the moment of the surge. You could see the smoke, you could see Karen's panicked face, and you could see her trying to hide the evidence. It was better than any movie I've ever seen. I paused it on a frame of her looking directly at the camera with a handful of stolen wire. So, I said, turning to the board members, would anyone like to explain why our president has been illegally tapping into my private utility system to avoid paying for her own car? Because according to my logs, she's borrowed about $400 worth of electricity in the last 2 weeks alone. Karen's face didn't just turn red. It turned a shade of purple I didn't think was biologically possible. "This is out of context," she shrieked. "That cable, it could belong to anyone. You tampered with the footage. The footage is time-stamped and geotagged." "Karen," I said calmly. "And the utility company? They've already seen it." That was the knockout blow. Her jaw literally dropped. The room erupted. Neighbors who had been bullied for years were suddenly standing up, shouting for her resignation. One of the other board members, a quiet guy named Bill who usually just nodded along, looked at me and asked, "Daniel, did you file a police report?" I looked at Karen and smiled. The kind of smile that says I win. "I did one better," I said. "I called the local power company's fraud department. Turns out, they take unauthorized grid bypass very seriously. Like hefty fines and potential jail time seriously." Karen was removed from the board that night, unanimously. A week later, I saw a utility truck parked outside her house. They weren't there to give her a contribution. They were documenting the illegal tap and handing her a citation that probably cost more than her Tesla's fancy rims. She had to hire a real electrician to fix the damage my stress test did to her home's internal wiring, too. Turns out, when you steal power, you don't get a warranty. I saw her yesterday while I was taking out the trash. She was plugging her car into a legitimate charger she'd finally had installed. She looked at me, her eyes full of pure, unadulterated venom. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" she hissed. I just shrugged, adjusted my sunglasses, and looked up at my beautiful, shining solar panels. "I don't know about clever, Karen. I just think electricity should stay in the house that generates it. Don't you?" She slammed her garage door so hard, I thought the windows might shatter. "My batteries are back to 100% now. The house is cool, the fridge is silent, and peace has returned to the neighborhood. But if there's one thing I've learned living here, it's that drama is like energy. It's never truly destroyed, it just changes form. The cameras are still rolling, just in case. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world where everyone's looking for a shortcut, where do you draw the line? Is it okay to borrow if the other person has too much? Or is theft just theft, no matter how green the excuse is? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Did I go too far with the surge, or did she get exactly what was coming to her? Drop a comment below. Let's talk about justice, Karens, and the true cost of free energy. And hey, if you enjoyed watching a bully get short-circuited, hit that like button and share this. It helps more than you know. Catch you in the next one. Stay grounded.